Coming up on 5 Minute News. US deaths from heart disease and diabetes climbed amid COVID. Biden moves to restore clean water safeguards ended by Trump. And Russian court outlaws opposition leader Navalny's groups. It's Thursday, June 10. I'm Anthony Davis. The US saw remarkable increases in the death rates for heart disease, diabetes, and some other common killers in 2020, and experts believe the reason may be that many people with dangerous symptoms made the lethal mistake of staying away from hospital for fear of catching coronavirus. The death rates posted online this week by federal health authorities add to the growing body of evidence that the number of lives lost directly or indirectly to the coronavirus in the US is far greater than the officially reported COVID-19 death toll of nearly 600,000 in 2020-2021. For months now, researchers have known that 2020 was the deadliest year in US history, primarily because of COVID-19. But the data released this week shows the biggest increases in the death rates for heart disease and diabetes in at least 20 years. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that nearly 3.4 million Americans died in 2020, an all-time record. Of those deaths, more than 345,000 were directly attributed to COVID-19. The CDC also provided the numbers of deaths for some of the leading causes of mortality, including the nation's top two killers, heart disease and cancer. But the data released this week contains the death rates, that is, fatalities, relative to the population. In raw numbers, there were about 32,000 more heart disease deaths than the year before. The CDC offers only the statistics, not explanations. The agency also did not say how many of the fatalities were people who'd been infected with and weakened by the coronavirus, but whose deaths were attributed primarily to heart disease, diabetes, or other conditions. Some experts believe a larger reason is that many patients did not seek treatment in an emergency room because they feared becoming infected with the virus. The Biden administration began legal action on Wednesday to repeal a Trump-era rule that ended federal protections for hundreds of thousands of small streams, wetlands, and other waterways, leaving them more vulnerable to pollution from development, industry, and farms. The rule, sometimes referred to as the Waters of the United States, or WOTUS, narrowed the types of waterways that qualify for federal protection under the Clean Water Act. It was one of hundreds of rollbacks of environmental and public health regulations under President Donald Trump, who said the rules imposed unnecessary burdens on business. The Trump-era rule, finalized last year, was long sought by builders, oil and gas developers, farmers, and others who complained about federal overreach that they said stretched into gullies, creeks, and ravines on farmland and other private property. Environmental groups and public health advocates say the rollback approved under Trump has allowed businesses to dump pollutants into unprotected waterways and fill in some wetlands, threatening public water supplies downstream and harming wildlife and habitat. A review conducted by the Biden administration determined that the Trump rule is significantly reducing clean water protections, particularly in arid states such as New Mexico and Arizona, where a large number of streams now lack federal jurisdiction. At least 333 projects that would have required Clean Water Act permits no longer need federal approval, the agencies said. Environmental groups hailed the EPA action, which they said will restore long-standing protections for critical drinking water sources. A Moscow court on Wednesday night outlawed the organizations founded by Russian opposition leader Alexey Navalny by labeling them extremist, the latest move in a campaign by authorities to silence dissent and bar Kremlin critics from running for parliament in September. The Moscow City Court's ruling, effective immediately, prevents people associated with Navalny's Foundation for Fighting Corruption and his sprawling network of regional offices across Russia from seeking public office. Many of Navalny's allies had hoped to run for parliamentary seats in the September 19 election. The extremist label also carries lengthy prison terms for activists who've worked with the organizations, anyone who donated to them, and even those who simply shared the group's materials. Navalny, the most ardent political foe of President Vladimir Putin, was arrested in January upon returning from Germany, where he spent 5 months recovering from a nerve agent poisoning that he blames on the Kremlin, an accusation that Russian officials reject. In February, Navalny was given a prison term for violating the terms of a suspended sentence from a 2014 embezzlement conviction that he dismissed as politically motivated. The case is just one part of a multi-pronged government strategy to steamroll the opposition ahead of elections that has included the banning of other organizations and arrests of activists. You can subscribe to 5 Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5 Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5 Minute News is an Evergreen Podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.